Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Welcome to the Wisdom of, where we tap into the wisdom of leaders around the world to get below the tips, tricks, and hacks that we so often find ourselves talking about. My guest today is the Honourable Victor Dominello. Victor spent 12 years as a minister in the New South Wales government, 15 years in total working in government. And as minister, he was the minister for the customer service and digitisation portfolio, the first portfolio of its kind in the world. He led significant government transformation, but the reinvention of frameworks that allowed government to serve its constituents in an increasingly digital world. He's also the CEO of the Future Government Institute, advising governments around the world on how to continue to evolve and transform so that they put the customer, the citizen, the member of society at the centre of everything they do. And during this episode, we get a deep walkthrough from Victor about the history of government through the various stages of evolution from pre-internet to post-COVID and indeed the AI-driven world. We have a deeper understanding of just what actually has to go on inside the thinking of government in ways that people might not be fully aware, and how you combine through a trust trinity the increasing movement towards digitisation and yet trying to maintain the focus on the lived experiences that people have living in a community, living in society, and in their interactions with government. It's a great episode for leaders of large corporations and enterprises, and it's a fantastic episode for everybody that understands the impact that government has on them and how they can participate and be better contributing members towards government's trying to achieve for them. It's a fantastic episode. Let's get into it. Well, Victor, you've spent 15 years in government, which is not everybody's experience, right? That's as a minister, so, at a senior level of leadership, and really driving some serious transformation in the New South Wales government that were then looked at worldwide. Some of those were first at a worldwide level, and now you're the CEO of the Future Government Institute. So, that's advising governments around the world and the World Bank around some of these issues, particularly wildly transformative issues. And we live in a wildly changing time. So I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. And I think I want to set the tone briefly, and we'll come back to this. But I'd love to set the tone of this trust trinity so people have a big picture view of maybe what sits behind everything you've done. Then we'll come back and explore that in some more detail after a few more questions. So when I say trust trinity, what is that to you, in terms of a way of driving transformation that is significant and maybe unexpected?
Well, the trust trinity is about one of the key things that governments are required to do. It's service delivery. But what does service delivery look like in the digital age? It's profoundly different in many ways because of the different medium and the immediacy of that medium. So after many, many years of being responsible for transformation, particularly digital transformation along service delivery lines, I realized that we had to basically get three things in play when you focus on service delivery in the digital age. The first is the who, the second is the what, and the third is the why. So who goes to identity? Identity is sacred, and it's got so many meanings and connotations around it. Like, I have my own identity. I identify as a proud Australian, and very proud of my Italian heritage.
Yeah,
that's one meaning of identity. But then there's another more simplified meaning, and that is the transactional meaning in terms of how I engage with governments and organisation. It's a data point.
Yes.
If we get the data point right, and provided I'm in control of it, me, the individual, then I can manage more seamlessly engagement with all the various verticals of government.
Right.
If I don't get that right, then I'm going to be telling my story time and time and time and time again, repeating forms multiple times, uh, getting disjointed information. It's just a terrible experience
Yeah.
as you cross the horizontal. Most government services are evolving around the vertical. So, you might hook up services in the vertical of education and you might have better seamless experiences there. But as soon as you move from I'm taking my child to school to, how do I get my child to school, in brackets, transport, then it's disjointed.
Yeah.
Let alone I'm having trouble with my child's health at school because they've got glue ear or something like that, and then have to intersect again with health. Now we're starting going horizontal, and it's a terrible experience. If you don't have identity, uh, again, with the individual in control of those settings, then you're not going to get that seamless horizontal experience. And in my experience, most of the wicked challenges in government that government has is around the horizontals.
Right.
I look at homelessness. People that are not born homeless. Normally what typically happens is, I'll give you an example. If somebody's been employed for a long time, they get retrenched, they get depressed, they get into substance abuse, then they abuse their partner, then they end into a terrible journey of going into the intersection with the judiciary and then corrective services. And you can see how that pattern, a downward spiral, if people were particularly vulnerable, you could see how a a knock-on effect like that could have terrible consequences that would lead to homelessness.
Yes.
Break up the family unit, got nowhere else to go, leave jail, go homeless. And that is not a failure of one silo. That's multiple silos along the way.
Yes.
If we don't get the identity piece at the top, it's very, very hard to solve for those wicked problems in society.
Yeah.
So that's the who. The what is the really powerful lever, and that's about the credentials, and that is what you're entitled to do. The who is the anchor tenant. You need that, but the real power play is what. So a driver's license, we digitize the driver's license. It's a de facto ID, but the reality is it's a credential, and that is it's a permission to drive.
Mm.
That's its fundamental purpose. It's a permission to drive. We also use it as a de facto ID, but it's fundamentally a credential to give you permission to drive. A working with children check is a permission to work with children. A trade licenses, such as a plumbing license or a electrical license, is a permission to engage in trade involving being a carpenter, a plumber, whatever the case may be, with the requisite skills to do it safely in somebody else's home.
Mm.
So all of these are credentials.
Yes.
And that's the what. And that's where most of the people will get the productivity and the efficiency dividends in their day-to-day life.
Yes.
So that's the second piece. The third piece is, all right, now that we got digital identity, now that we got credentials, why is it trustworthy? The framework we've set up at the Future Government Institute is along Sprite. I will not trust digital identity. I will not trust verifiable credentials to source unless they are secure, they are private, there's resilience in there, it's inclusive, it's transparent, and it's ethical, i.e. Sprite. If you've got those frameworks in place, then these identities and the credentials become trustworthy. That's when, if you wrap service delivery around these modules, you can drive profound change.
Yeah, just to give me Sprite again, the R and the E. So secure, private,
resilient,
yeah,
inclusive, transparent, and ethical.
Perfect. And a model emerges. And I suspect, what is the connective tissue? I mean, you put these three things together, right? The who, the what, and the why, which is a pretty obvious framework. What is the connective tissue between these? I mean, let's talk about government for a moment, and we'll come back to this connective tissue. A lot of people don't really understand how many balls are in the air when a government agency is trying to do something, right? How many forces are at play and everything else, and yet they're central to society. And is the connective tissue between these technology? Is it people? Is it both? Is it are there how do you, when you're sort of designing this transformation, where do you sort of know you're going to land? It's going to be some kind of a solution to do this. Vague question, but
yeah. Well, what we're trying to do with this model is evolve government around the individual, around
yeah,
the human, keeping the customer at the center of service delivery.
yeah,
Yet through the Future Government Institute, we focus not on digital transformation, but on government evolution.
right,
And there is a profound difference. When you transform something, it is very powerful. You put a seed in the ground, a digital transformation seed in the ground, you water it, you fertilize it, you till the soil, and you transform the seed into a vine.
yeah,
And there are thousands and thousands of transformations happening in any given day around the world. And some are complex, some are simple, but massive transformation. But if the vines are growing out and there is no structure to it, then they just form in a clump. And the experience of the human that's trying to absorb the services, they get just wrapped up in this this manifestation of vines along the ground. It's a terrible experience. Each transformation is pretty profound, but then try to navigate it across again the horizontal. You're just getting caught in the weeds. Government evolution is something different. If we can create a lattice or a framework upon which the vines can grow and evolve, then you're seeing the evolution of government services, and it's far more coordinated around the human. The evolution that we talk about at Future Government Institute is first there was paper government. That's G0, government, zero. And that happened until about 1990. And with paper government, what you see is people will get services through paper forms. Like the
yeah,
government can get a Ouija board out and say, Simon, I now know what services you need.
mm,
If you want a service, you're going to have to fill out a form. If you want money, you're going to have to fill out a form. Even if you have to pay money to government, you have to fill out a form. Like
mm,
even if you pick up the phone and speak to somebody on government, the other side of the phone, somebody's filling out a form. If you go and see somebody in person in government, they're filling out a form. Everything is through the prism of a form. That's just 101. Up until 1990, it was all done paper, and it was done 9 to 5, 5 days a week. 1990, a big meteor hit the planet, and it was called the internet.
yeah,
Every government got hit by this internet. And what happened was we went from paper form to web form.
yeah,
And that's government 1.0. And web form means we're still doing it in silos, still along the verticals. But what happened was instead of 9 to 5, 5 days a week, we went 24/7, 7 days a week. That's web form. Then 15 years later, in about 2005, another meteor hit the planet. It was called smartphones
mm,
and social media. It was the platform era.
mm,
And all of a sudden, people started getting apps on their phone and more personalized services, a bit more engagement through social media channels, but still very much in silos. That's government 2.0.
yeah,
So we go from paper, 0, web, G1, platform, G2.
mm,
Then 15 years later, again, another big meteor hit the planet, and it was called COVID. And it forced every government around the world to rethink service delivery. Could you imagine government saying during the teeth of COVID, I want you to download 20 different apps, 20 different phone numbers, 20 different forms, and try and listen to what we're doing. No, governments realize in order to get people through, hopefully a once in 100-year pandemic, we're going to have to make it really simple and seamless. So things like the Service New South Wales app and national apps started developing where true tell us once experience. You can get all your information, contact phone numbers, health certificates, and vaccine certificates all on that. That's the beginning of a more uniform experience.
Yeah.
That's government 3.0. That's now we're talking horizontal.
Yes.
And this is what governments like Singapore and Estonia have been, and again, Service New South Wales have been pushing for years before, but that forced everyone, COVID forced everyone to rewire themselves. Now think, and in another 15 years, because the AI is coming into the picture now, in 2035, we will have, everyone's going to have a Jarvis on their phone or in their glasses or in their ears, right? Or on their body. And we're not going to see a form. I'm going to say, hey, Jarvis, get me a driver's license. Through a series of my APIs and the government APIs, my Jarvis will talk to government Jarvis. They'll swap information through those channels. And hey, presto, I've got a driver's license. I won't see a form. It will be a form-less era. The agentic age is government 4.0, and that's a formless era. Most governments in their evolution are just transforming away in their silos in G2. They started scratching around G3, but then after the pandemic left, they went back to G2 because that's how governments are wired. So if we talk more about you need to transforming is critical, but transforming against a standard gets us to evolution. And that's where we're putting this human at the center. And G3 at its heart is putting the human at the center, not government silos at the center. This is big change.
Yeah. That's, that, first of all, what a fantastic historical walkthrough for people in terms of probably everyone's listening to this can relate to the experiences they had as they went through those various forms, right? And I had government evolution and the frameworks for that at the center of the model, but you've just indicated that really it needs to be the human experience that lives at the center of the model.
Absolutely.
And if we talk about this through those various forms, as we move through paper form, platform, web form, I think you then had uniform and formless.
And then formless. And again, all of these are expressions of experience. How am I experiencing service delivery via a company?
So oftentimes people want to know what is the integration that holds this together. The integration is actually the human experience.
100%.
And government needs to evolve at a framework level to handle that human experience. What does that mean? Get clear about the identity. I loved the conversation about, the vertical perhaps addresses the need the person has, but actually so much of that experience is in the horizontal and the detail inside the horizontal. It's about what permissions people are given because of this government process or this government framework that they can live in, and then why the trustworthiness through Sprite matters so much. Such a great sort of articulation of the walkthrough, and with a historical context. And so it kind of brings us to a interesting question at a broad level about trust. It sounds like such an obvious question to ask, but why does trust need to be built at all? And what's happened to the relationship between citizens in a country and governments that there's such a need for this emphasis on trust now that, when I was a child and a teenager, you actually didn't question anything that the government did. But we question everything today. And so what's sort of happened is we've gone through these forms, if you like, and you've quite rightly anchored so much on trust. I'd love to just drop into the trust conversation, and it might be through Sprite, but the why. I'd like to dial in on that why circle for a bit.
Yeah, because think about it, when we're growing up, fabrication of information it existed, but it was harder. That's the
Mm.
reality. We are in information flood at the moment, and it's only getting harder. And with the various channels that have evolved, particularly through digital channels, and that's why I emphasize this is about service delivery in the digital age. Yeah, and when I was growing up, I knew my neighbour.
Yes.
How do I know my neighbour? Well, I went to school with their kids, and we shared wine, shared stories. I could collaborate with them. If they told me one story and that story remained consistent, oh, well, that's trustful. I can trust this. If they're
Mm.
swapping stories, I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe I don't trust them. You look them in the eye. You form those bonds that you can do in a very physical dimension, uh, in a lived experience environment. In a digital age, it's very, very different. Yeah, anybody can be my digital neighbor somewhere around the world. And now with the augmented reality that's coming through, and AI in particular, we don't even know, who we're speaking to on the other line. It could be an avatar,
Mm.
and we're in year three. We've literally just coming up to year three of the anniversary of the launch of Chat GPT. So where are we going to be in 3 years time, let alone
Yeah.
10 in 2035? So we need to create frameworks in place that we trust the source of information. But can I say this? And I say this from a perspective that I was a minister for 12 years. Trust is a two-way thing. You know, I need to trust my government. I need to trust that when they tell me that I'm authorized to do X, Y, Z, I'm authorized to drive a car, I'm authorized to get on the road, I'm authorized to do ABC, and more importantly, my neighbor is authorized to do it because my neighbor, I'll be engaging with them if they haven't been vetted in terms of they're an authorized electrician, etc., everything starts breaking down. But in the modern world, imagine if I don't even know if it's the government anymore. But more importantly, imagine if the government doesn't even know if it's you.
Yeah.
So in the increasingly, trust needs to be both ways. Government needs to know you are you. Now, this is
Interesting.
a really difficult concept to explain to the average person because oh, I don't want Big Brother. This has got nothing to do with Big Brother. This is about government providing services and keeping bad actors out. You can have guest accounts, ghost accounts, but if you've got malicious accounts increasingly in the future, that's going to get into the machine and it's the good people that are going to get impacted. So
Mm.
governments need to start vetting and saying, hold it, I need to know you are you. And increasingly in the future, is your agent, your AI agent trustworthy? Like, am I dealing with you, Simon, your AI agent bot? Has that bot got a virus in it that's going to affect my government system that's going to impact on service delivery more broadly? These are really complex areas.
Mm.
In the private sector, it is moving a million miles an hour. Government's going to have to get there because we're used to now Uber food, Uber everything. We're used to having agents on our phone. Government's going to have to catch up. If we don't get that trust framework in place, yeah, all hell's going to break loose. So
Mm.
we need to start thinking, the futurists within us are going to have to start creating you um, trust infrastructure and architecture for the agentic age. I really believe that. And we're just starting to scratch the surface of what that looks like now.
So you're the CEO and founder of the institute that really is advising governments on this, but this is as important at the company and corporate level, and at the charity not for profit level, everywhere where there's this relationship. And is it possible that the private sector is actually rushing too fast at this and not building the trust frameworks that are needed? So if government's slow, is the private sector too fast? Are we, there's tension because AI has taken off like nothing else I've ever seen.
Oh, exactly.
It's just
And
ridiculous.
I'm reasonably across it, but every morning I wake up and I'm seeing and reading something new. I'm thinking, wow, that's just crazy. Like it's just, you expect an announcement like this every year or two, let alone every week these days.
Yes.
Um, there's an inbuilt protection in the market for the private sector, in the sense that if the private sector moves too fast and the trust is broken, as a customer, I'm just going to walk.
Yes.
I'm not going to go back. And then if you have any customers, the company dies, right? And there are laws in place. If you do something that is egregious, that impacts me, I've got consumer protection laws. I can pierce the bail of incorporation. I used to be a lawyer. We can get to directors if we need to. If it's, if somebody dies in the course of a workplace accident, there are fundamental protections in place in the marketplace. But with government, it's very, very different. You just move to another government, but the organ still exists. You just change the political leadership. So it's very, very different for government service delivery. We don't, because most of it's monopolistic. It's not like, I choose another public education system. It's all public education.
Yes.
So the private sector, if it wants to go fast, if it wants to take the risk, provided it doesn't hurt anyone, and if it hurts somebody, there's going to be somebody on the hook for it. You do you.
Yeah, it's an interesting paradigm, isn't it? That even with a change of elected representatives, the machinery of government is fundamentally the same as it was with the previous group, and so the transformation, needs to happen at that framework and mechanics of government level, and it's we'll come back to AI in a little bit, but can we talk about the identity sort of paradox in this, and that identity piece that you had about, who am I? But I'm also data points, and I also want to manage the horizontal. I'd love to dig into the vertical versus the horizontal, particularly the horizontal a bit more. And then also I'd love us to talk a little more about how people can be in greater control of their digital identity, because that is a big deal for people worried about Big Brother and oversight and everything else. Yet, interesting perspective from you, the government needs to know who you are to both be able to serve you and trust your interaction with government.
Yeah.
It's the first time someone's spoken about, I've got to be able to trust your AI bot, to behave in an appropriate way. So I'd love to dig into this identity paradox a little bit and just let you loose on the vertical, the horizontal, the data points, and this, are you who you say you are? Is your bot who it says it is? I'm just going to open the gate and let you walk through it and take us on the journey.
Well, because I love a good metaphor, and some of the issues that we're talking about are so complex and because there's so many moving parts. I go to a lot of governments around the world and a lot of NGOs and a lot of corporations and speak to them, and there's rarely a discussion that doesn't include AI these days.
Yeah.
The way I see AI, it's the Ferrari. AI is a Ferrari.
Yeah.
It's very fast, very powerful, and everybody's talking about it. Everybody wants the AI, the Ferrari in the garage.
Yeah.
If AI is the Ferrari, then digital identity is the key to get into the Ferrari.
Yeah.
And then your credentials are your license. You've got what you can do with that key. I've got the authority, I've got the permission because I've done my testing, and I'm okay to drive the car. And then the Sprite framework is the racetrack.
Yeah.
So if you put a Ferrari on a dirt road, good luck with that.
Yeah.
You hit the first corner, you're going to fall. You're going to kill people.
Yes.
Hence, the Ferrari needs to be on security. It's got to be on a secure gate. It's got to be private. It's got to be resilient in the event of an accident, inclusive, all those things. And then the fuel to the Ferrari is data. Ferraris without fuel is going to sit idle.
Yeah.
So what's the data? You got the crude oil, which is a lot of it's coming in. Just terrible data sources, cluttered from data swamps. And then you get the high octane fuel that it's required. So if we can clean up that fuel to get it into the Ferrari, put it on get an identity, and increasingly an identity for your agent as well, because the agent's a co-pilot everyone talks about, right? But if your agent is a malicious agent, i.e., Imagine if your AI agent was a sleeper agent or a double agent.
Mhm.
This is the world we're moving into. We've got to make sure that that agent is not only attached to me, it's mine, it's trustworthy because it's doing what I ask it to do. It doesn't have a virus or inside it that's going to turn on me. So we need to get all these pieces together to get this amazing Ferrari that's going to be super fast, super powerful, that everyone's going to enjoy safely around the racetrack. If we do that, we're going to get profound joy and benefits out of it. If we don't, it's going to cause problems.
But that horizontal management of the data points is just so complex and becoming more and more complex these days just because of the volume of data points that are being collected. Is that what's the shift in thinking? Particularly think back when you were a minister still, so you're actually inside the system, right? As an advisory, institute or consultancy, you're sort of outside of the system, and you get a certain amount of gravitas that comes from. I work with lots of organisations around the world, blah blah blah. But when you're inside and you're trying to lead a transformation like this, what's the shift in thinking? And this could be true for business leaders as well as government leaders, that you found yourself constantly having to try and create in people just for them to grasp this shift from vertical to horizontal. Vertical service delivery, how are we delivering these services? Horizontal is how are we managing these identities and the data points and everything else. Was there a predominant shift of thinking you found yourself having to constantly try to push?
Definitely. Again, every government around the world, and I talk about this all the time, every government around the world operates in a two-sun solar system. The two sources of power. The first source of power is authority. Whether it's the premier, the prime minister, the governor, the president, who is that source of power that says you are ultimately, I can say yes or no, we're going to do this or don't do this, right? And the second source of power is money, right? So just because I say you can do it, Simon, now I'm going to have to find money for you to do it. They're the two sources of power. You have a CEO and a CFO. And then so they're the two suns in our solar system in every government around the world. And every government around the world, even if you're a dictator, you're run by committees. There's just that because you can't do everything on your own. You need committees. So in federal government or in the state government here in Australia, for example, and no doubt around the world, they'll have an equivalent. We've got cabinet that the prime minister will control, and then an expenditure review committee or a finance committee or something like that the treasurer controls, right? So they're your two suns. And every planet, every silo of government rotates around those two suns. So if you're health, prime minister, can we do this? Yes. Treasurer, give me the money to do it. Yes. If you're education, prime minister, can we do this? Yes. Do we have the money? Well, we don't have the money. I'll give you a bit of money to do part of it. But every silo of government, every planet evolves and revolves around those two suns. The biggest mind shift in thinking that we are promoting through the Future Government Institute is we need a third sun. We need a CXO, because that CXO is representative of the human experience. Chief Experience Officer. Now, with that comes all the other, the C-suite, operatives, Chief Data Officer, Chief AI Officer, all, CIO, CTO, CDO. But basically, all those are wrapped around one fundamental principle. Like, what are we doing AI for? But ultimately, it's there to improve the human experience, right?
Yes.
Why have we got data? Ultimately, it's there to improve the human experience. So just badge it all up as a CXO. If we've got the CXO, that's that third wheel. And that's the horizontal.
Yes.
And governments don't have that. What we did in New South Wales, we created, essentially I was the CXO. And I had my own committee. And that enabled me to say to the other silos, that experience on its own is fine, but I'm not sending my kid to school. I've got to get my kid to school by transport. And if there's a health issue, I've got to get my kid looked after whilst at school with health. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or, in the later years, they need to start looking for jobs. Where does industry come into this? There's how are we connecting these various life events? And the life events, ultimately involve multiple silos coming together to harmonize that human experience. And the real wicked problem is that so often in our life journey, some of these massive life events, such as the death of a loved one, that's where we want government to harmonise service delivery around the individuals, because the person's going through profound grief anyway. So what does government do? Not deliberately, but by design, we inflict process trauma on top of the trauma. A loved one passes away, here are 20 forms to fill out. And that doesn't even include the banks and the telcos and the
Yes.
and it is just a horrific experience. This is where government should be at its best, at a G3, to say, I'm so sorry for your loss. Tell us once, and we will get as much of that process trauma out of your way so you can grieve with dignity. But governments, by design, pile on, pile on, pile on. It's just not good enough. So it's a complete rewiring from a G2, where most governments are sitting, to a G3, which is far more human-centric.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to that CXO, human-centric, human experience conversation in a minute. I do want to ask briefly what do you think is the biggest misconception citizens have in countries about government? If we think free democratic governments, what's the biggest misconception the public have? Both you and I have worked inside of government, you much more deeply than me, but it is way more complex than people realise and way more challenging. But what is the biggest misconception you think the public have about government?
It's paradoxical in the sense that most people think government's hopeless because all the service disjointed. But then equally, they think, well, I told the government, and therefore they should know. So they think it's simple in the sense that, when you go to a ballot box, I'm voting for one government. They don't realise there's all these different organisms that operate completely, out of sync with one another. So I think that's where the big disconnect is. Again, they go into the real world and they're dealing with the Apples and the Ubers and the Airbnbs and the Amazons, and everything is seamless. And if I want to order something on my phone, I get it tomorrow type thing, right? Things are getting faster and more seamless. They even start to know my preferences on Netflix, and everything's curated around me. In government, I've already told you who I am. I've already told you my problem. Why am I telling you it again? So I think the biggest disconnect is they don't realize how bad government is.
Yeah.
And when you've been inside the machine, you realize how, I shouldn't say bad, how complex it is.
Yeah.
It's the most complex organism on the planet.
Yeah. And there is a world of difference operating an organisation in a free market environment that is fundamentally driven by profit and return
and customer.
The market regulates how much of that you get, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to an organisation that's driven by multiple bottom lines that are measured differently by many different groups of people. It's just a world of difference. It's interesting. You talked about the number of services and they're often not connected together. You did push for a single this uniform one website, a single point of access, which if you think about, for example, youth mental health or something like that, if there was a single door, parents, clinicians, GPs, teenagers could walk through when there's a challenge, and on the other side of that door there was a highly curated experience for them, it would solve a lot of problems. This single doorway. You took dozens of disconnected agencies in New South Wales. Let's lean into a little bit of change management stuff. I'm like, how did you get people who had their own patches they're protecting, I guess, different agendas, and bring them together into this single point of entry, if you like, or get them to agree to become a part of this uniform, unified approach. What were some of the key things you figured out to actually get that to happen?
Well, I go back to getting the message and the communication, the settings right. Most silos in government, that we need silos. Like we need the deep domain expertise that comes with those with people in the public services just been specializing in transport or defense, whatever it is, right? We need silos. But increasingly in an evolved government form in a G3, we also need more horizontal layers to drive the
Yes.
real dividends that every government is trying to drive in terms of better service delivery. What governments or silos tend to do is build walls around themselves, protecting their patch for good reason. Treasurer, don't touch me. I'm good the way it is. I just need more money from you. I don't need anybody looking into my patch. Just give me more money to live. So when you open up, when you start exposing yourself, which you need to do to collaborate, there's an automatic resistance to do this. So the narrative I used is, and it took a while to break through, but the narrative I used is, look, this is not a territory play. This is not a land grab. We're not trying to dismantle your agency. See us, the horizontal, as the GP. We will see the patient as they come through. We will do the triage. We can get rid of the splinters. We can do the tests. But then we will give a warm handover to you, the specialist. We don't have your expertise in defense or transport or health or whatever it is. We need you because you're going to do the really complex, hard work that, quite frankly, you're there for. And we're going to get rid of all the silly stuff up the top that you don't need to muck around with, but we're going to triage that and give it to you. Once you build that relationship, that they can both symbiotically work together. You change the mindset. Oh wow, this is not a hostile takeover. This is actually improving the experience. And when they come to us, we already know. We already know where the problems are. We go straight into it and fix it better. So once you do that, you take the splinter out of the paw, and people start opening up, saying, "Okay, now let's start focusing on that human experience from front door right throughout the house."
Yeah. Interesting shift in thinking about change management. A lot of change management, comes from a direction of it'll be better our way, as opposed to what you've just articulated is remove the risk and then create the better together.
100%.
But so much change management is going to be better our way. And that's a big shift. Remove the risk and better together, and figure out that takes deeper thinking, right, and more conversation and dialogue, and so instead of just getting to it, we've solved this, better our way. No, we're going to remove the risk. You shouldn't be worrying about this stuff at the top. You are critical. Let's do a better together story. So, you've also, created this. You talk about the balance between technology and human, and as we push towards digitalization and digitalized services and things like that, you've also been an advocate for real live locations, real live human, actually you can go here or you could call here or whatever. What happens when we go too far? It's like heavy, like maintaining human touch, right? What happens when you go too far towards automation, when you tip over the edge and just there's nowhere for someone to go? It's just all digitalized and automated. What's the consequence of that?
Again, it goes to trust. Like if you only provide one channel and people don't trust digital, then where else do they go? And then again, government is not service for some; it's service for all. There are going to be some people that just don't trust digital for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
They can be flat earthers. They can have fundamental distrust in government. For whatever reason, they could be vision impaired. For whatever reason, you do you. If you do not trust that service, government should be there to say, well, here are some other channels for you to do. Now, we've seen in New South Wales that if you create something that's useful, that's usable, that's trustworthy, you're going to get 85% adoption, which is just stratospheric. But there's still going to be 15% of the population that, no, I want to walk in, I want to look somebody in the eye, and I don't care about if I have to fill out a form. That's the way I do it. 85% will say, no, 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 no. I want to click my phone a couple of times and do it from the beach and get government out of my life. But again, I don't talk about digital transformation as much. I talk about service transformation in the digital age.
Yeah.
That then is more inclusive to say, well, service transformation in the digital age means you can have a front door experience face to face, but the human at the other end of the counter will use digital tools to quickly go through to make sure we get things done as fast as possible. But you'll still have that face-to-face human contact. So I think that is non-negotiable for governments moving forward. And think about increasingly, particularly from a cyber perspective, when there is just so many opportunities to attack identity, digital identities and the like, it's getting more and more complex. We're increasingly going to have to get people to come in and say, look, Simon, you've been hacked. Whether it was your bank account, your telco account, whatever it is, you've been hacked. I need you to physically come in so that we get a sense that you are who you are, say you are.
Mm.
And so we're going to have those physical channels to do that.
It's interesting, that one line that you said, government isn't service for some, it's service for all. I mean, if you have the liberty of choosing who your customers are going to be and then who you're not interested in serving, no problem. But if government is service for all, not just service for some, then you have to address the ways that various sectors of the population are trying to access what you're doing. And that again, is a level of challenge. You talk about...
Well, that's the I in Sprite. That's the
inclusiveness, right? And that's a serious responsibility. You can't budget that away.
No.
You can't
I'll give you an example. If a government provided services to me, but not my mum, I'm going to say, thank you very much, but I don't trust you anymore. You've just, you're not helping my mum, who is the most important person in my life, right? So I'm sorry, I don't trust you at the ballot box.
Yeah, you can't budget that service for all option away. So, you talk with governments about, being governments in, a post-globalization era. What do you mean by that? What is post-globalization? And, why is that important in terms of trust and the trust frameworks?
Oh, well, we started seeing that during COVID, where supply chains started breaking up. It was everyone scrambling to do their own thing. Like it was, I remember I was part of the crisis cabinet, and we were all scrambling. What that reflected to me was that we have to start building more trusted relationships globally.
Yeah.
So, the big blocks of the past are becoming far more fragmented and far more nuanced. You've got two big systems in play. You've got the BRICS system, Brazil, Russia, Iran, China, South Africa, and they're adding to that. And then the SWIFT system, basically the Western democracies. But even those are starting to move around. Like we work with India in some, and then not in the other. So every relationship is very nuanced. So in a post-globalized world where everyone's starting to come back into their box, we need to start going a bit deeper than, oh, well, you and I are just joined at the hip and we'll always be together. That's not the case anymore. It's far more complicated.
And a lot of our audience are business owners, founders, and business leaders. And, I think it's more important than ever before for business leaders to be very aware of government behaviour, government interactions at that national and international level, particularly for an international company. You are so impacted by how this is playing out in the world today.
Definitely. I'm a student of geopolitics. It's never been more volatile than now, particularly with AI and chips and supply lines around that. And if you look at the way, and then put in demographics, how the demographics are playing out globally over the next 20 to 30, 40 years. It's just massive change on the horizon, massive change.
Yes. And in the midst of all of that, free enterprise still continues. It is still one of the most positive forces on the planet if the right people are leading it. Alongside of well-led government. You were asked by the World Bank to help, with a sort of a digital identity initiative in Mongolia. This is coming from a country you understand, and you're transporting the thinking across cultures and things like that. What translates? What travels well and what doesn't when you're trying to shift this?
It's what you put in that diagram, human experience. So ultimately, the reason that I and so many people like me are so passionate about this is because we want to use data, digital tech to profoundly improve quality of life and reduce suffering. We're not going to do it without it.
Mm-hmm.
And government service delivery is at the heart of so much of this stuff. So if we use data, digital tech, we will see modern tech miracles in a safe, trustworthy way that government is going to be at the heart of in terms of orchestrating society and the economy. Other than that, and we all get on our knees and pray for miracles en masse. It's just not going to happen.
Mm.
So, if we look at it through the human experience, we're all here for a finite period of time. How do we profoundly improve the human journey and profoundly reduce suffering? If we do that, and the only way we're going to do it is through this, not transformation, but evolution.
Yeah. It's this, and that might be true for everything to do with, for example, AI, the digital world that we live in. We have to figure out how to keep the human experience and the integrity of the human experience at the center of everything. Otherwise, what's the purpose of?
Yeah, exactly. What are we doing? Are we serving bots?
Yeah.
Again, as part of the Future Government Institute, we've articulated 3 core pillars for capability build. One is around leadership.
Yep.
Nothing happens without leadership. Chaos happens without leadership. Human experience, and then trust. They are the 3 things we need to bed down.
Yeah. So let's talk about the future of Government Institute. You have a mission to shape the next era of governance. There's a shift in word there. So, what is a government? And you've touched on this a little bit, but if we think 2035, 2040, we push ourselves 10, 15 years out. Interesting that when you went through the history, there was 15-year jumps, right? So you push us out 2035, 2040. What does a government that's truly ready for 2035, 2040 look like? How would we experience it differently as citizens of a society for a government that really is ready for 2035, 40?
Well, far more control in the individual's hands, for starters. Like the single most powerful unit for control is information data, right? In autocracies, they say, give me all the data you can, because if I've got all the data, I'm in control.
Mm-hmm.
The single most powerful unit in a democracy is not the state, it's the individual. So flip it. How do we empower or strengthen democracies? You empower the individual with more control over their data. So I now start curating service delivery around me. Again, I might want to do all the silos and the jumping because I just need the exercise. But if I don't, and I want to get rid of the trauma and the friction and spend more time with my loved ones, then I'll choose this. But I'm in control, me, the individual. I need to be able to toggle on and toggle off. Yes, I want these insights. I'm happy for this data to be shared, provided it's anonymized, provided you just saw it after the first bite, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then I'm going to get the profound insights as a result of it. But again, I control my journey. I want you to prompt me. If you see something that's that I hadn't even thought of, please prompt me about something or nudge me about something that I hadn't even thought of. Again, I'm in control of my journey. I want you to leave me alone. toggle off, don't annoy me.
Mm.
But it's much more controlled by the individual about their life experience as it's impacted by government services. That's what it's like. And again, if I'm in more control, then I'm going to trust it much more.
Yeah. There's a perception that some people might have that people enter public service for power and for position. And I think what people have heard also littered all the way through the podcast today is that it seems like everything you've done has been driven by how do I make sure my mother is being looked after well enough and can access? How do we make sure we don't create process trauma on somebody that's actually suffered a death and now they have a million forms to fill out? How do we put people in control of their own identity and their credentials and the security of that, if you like? How do we make sure that we join up lots of different and complex and necessary services so people have access in the simplest possible way? There's a lot of good thinking going on, but these are very, very complex issues. And I just think it's been super useful, Victor, for people to get a different lens on this, a different perspective on this, because there's a lot of people working really hard to try and do this work. And, the best way for people to get an outcome is to be engaged with it. Like, think deeply about, what are you asking people to do, and do you have the people focusing on those things? I'd like to finish up with 3 quick questions, sort of quick question, quick response, that aren't about transformation, just for people to get to know you a bit more. You're obviously a student of history. You like to look backwards to understand what looking forward looks like. If you could travel to any time period in history and just be able to observe it, and take the lessons, what would that period of history be and why?
Oh, I'm probably biased. Oh no, two. Romans. That's the bias in me probably. But Egyptians. I want to know how they built the pyramids.
Yeah. And
I
they
have no idea. I was there recently. I just it's mind-boggling to see what was built.
and they
To
probably had a fairly substantial bureaucracy, both of them actually, Egypt
that,
and,
that would matter. And there was slavery and everything else, all the bad things that went with it. But it's just some of them. I don't know how you build that today, let alone back then.
yeah, absolutely. What do you have a personal philosophy underneath all of this that keeps you anchored? Something that you have realized is super important or important to you, or just something you keep going back to as a personal philosophical position?
Yeah, personally, I'm a speck. I'm here for a blink of an eye. I'm a grain of sand. How do I've been given so many blessings? There's this great parable in the Bible. It's something about the poor widow. Uh, they poor widow put in a penny in the plate, uh, and the rich person put in $100, and the poor widow was celebrated. And I said, "Why do you celebrate?" Well, because I gave you hardly anything. Yet the rich person, I gave you so much, and you gave me respectively nothing back. I feel like I've been blessed with riches in terms of opportunity.
Yes.
So, how do I give that back? If I'm lucky, I've got another 10 rotations around the sun. How do I play that forward? And the idea, that's why the future government it's about creating structure and form so that the evolution of government will continue well after I've gone, so that we, again, focus on the improvement of the human experience.
Yeah. What's the you've had broad and interesting experience at many levels of organization and community. What's been one of the most surprising things for you in the midst of all of this that you just didn't expect it, and yet you're glad you saw it, you heard it, you experienced it?
Oh, just super grateful to be alive in this age. Like, it's never been a better time to be alive. Like, just seeing uh, again, modern tech miracles. I was speaking to a specialist today about the future of brain health. Like, the things that are coming around the corner are just sci-fi.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, sure, there's lots of problems and lots of challenges, but equally, there's never been a better time to live.
Yeah. And we've been living in sci-fi for 15 years since the smartphone was invented.
Oh, and again, like imagine where it's going to be in 15 years.
Yeah.
But we have to ground ourselves on lived experience, and that's what. Yeah, because it's so easy to get a bot to talk about things. One of the things I focus on a lot is what's your LX? What's your lived experience?
Yeah.
Because anybody can ask a bot to write me 1,000 words. I'm now looking at where is your lived experience in that 1,000 word, Simon? Because that gives it the authenticity and the credibility. Otherwise, it's just going to be a word salad
Yeah.
with a smart bot just putting a lot of good sequences together. But if I'm reading, or I'm listening to you, and you're saying, this is what happened to me, I'm thinking, okay, I can relate to that. And this is what I think. Okay, well, yeah, that's built on a mountain of life experience that I'm going to relate to.
Yeah. One of the things that we do with companies around the world is capture and codify the core genius of the company. And, I've created a model around where does genius, the origins of genius. And, it's almost always in the founder, where it came from, and that it evolves over time. And we're seeing more and more people, for example, writing a book using chat or using, um, the lived experience is the uniqueness.
I agree.
And that won't be replicated by something unless it actually has the entire life history available to it. But even then, how does it
But
pull that out of it?
even
It's
then,
it's that weird thing that happened in that one moment that caused you to see it differently. And I love that. I hadn't heard anyone use the term LX, but I love that idea, the lived experience. So that's where true genius starts, and then it's built on. So, Victor, thank you so much for giving us the time today. And I think really valuable for people to think about this, not just in the context of, be a participant in society, be aware of what, government is trying to do, be aware of what our responsibilities are. Our identity isn't just ours to protect, it's ours to verify, it's ours to honor and respect, including our digital identities. And for leaders of commercial enterprises, think about how this relates to the experiences your customers and your team are having as they deal with you, with your organization. So, Victor, thank you so much for sharing so much of your insights with us. I will look at government through an entirely different set of lenses.
It's not too traumatic.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Appreciated the chat. Thank you.
Thank you.